If Carver Willis can't go, Washington's offensive line needs to hold up against Maryland.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you're getting this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you don't miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio-only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the program out a lot. Now, Lars, we got a really fun show coming out all day, every day today. We're going to talk about some of the Redshirt plans that Jedd Fisch hinted at during his Monday press conference for some seniors like Omari Evans and Jacob Manu, and potentially another freshman in Zaydrius Rainey-Sale. We'll get to that in a little bit. We're going to talk about what the edge rusher position might look like without Zach Durfee, because two guys that we talked about on the Monday show suffered injuries, didn't get a big-time update on either of them from Jedd Fisch during his Monday press conference, but the other one who is probably more important right now because we saw such a big change without him is left tackle Carver Willis.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when you think about who's behind him and what that might look like if Carver isn't able to go against Maryland. Obviously, Carver's been a massive addition from, coming from K-State, making the transition from right tackle to left. He's been solid, but I think he hasn't been clear and above like the best offensive lineman for Washington, because that honor is Drew Azzopardi.
Sure.
But Carver's been arguably number 2 or 3, depending on what your what your view is on Landon Hatchett. And to me, I think if you don't have Carver, you're going to take a hit, because Max McCree, who would be the presumptive starter in his place, isn't as good as him, but he's not as far off as it was last season when you went to Swan and Fasolo as a redshirt freshman. And those guys, hadn't even played a couple of games yet. Obviously not having Carver is going to be felt in some manner or form, but it's not going to be as big of a loss as it might have been, last year per se.
So I think that's really fair. I just want to throw some numbers out there where after Carver Willis went down in the second half, because he didn't play the entire second half against Ohio State, Washington had 69 yards of offense. Very nice number there. But you look at that number, especially compared to the first half, where you were doing a really good job moving the ball on the ground. You're averaging 4.7 yards per carry for the first half up until the injury. Like, there was very clearly some motion, even against a really solid Ohio State front seven, which I think is certainly a testament to Carver and this entire offensive line, where John Mills looks really good. Drew Azzopardi's allowed 1 pressure this season. So I certainly agree when you say he's been probably the best guy overall so far on the line. I think that this is all something that's worth throwing out there, is because this unit has shown to be so good this year because it's such a complete unit with a whole bunch of chemistry that we didn't see from them last year. And taking Carver Willis out of the mix, he has been exactly what you asked him to be since he got here. A veteran presence, a veteran leader, and a sturdy left tackle. I don't think he's been elite per se. PFF certainly agrees that he's been a very good left tackle this year, but I look at what he was brought in to do, and he has done his job admirably. And it's not a knock on Maximus McCree to say that it would be a step down, but it's also just one of those things where this is what you went and got him out of the transfer portal to be, both of these guys. Where for Carver, it's, he's done his job and then some. And for Max, it was at the time, you need a starting left tackle. And he was able to do that until he got hurt against Iowa last year. But now it's also, okay, during spring and fall, he was asked to be a swing tackle. He played both left and right. And it was just, okay, very clearly that if somebody went down in any capacity, Max was going to be the first guy off the bench at either position. And now we're seeing that come to fruition at left tackle. I just think that there's certainly something to be said for the cohesion of the offensive line and the way it's all just been built over the first 4 weeks of the year. And I think that if we just look at what it might look like over the next couple of weeks, let's say Carver misses this game against Maryland, but is able to return next Friday against Rutgers. There are certainly going to be questions, but I think that especially when you look at the ground game, I don't know if it's going to be a major hindrance to Washington's offense, but we still would certainly need to see that on the field.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to be felt in some manner or form, but like you hinted at with the ground game, Jonah's runs have mostly been to the right side. The majority of his touchdown runs, the majority of his big play, big gains have come behind Drew, and to an extent, Garen Hatchett, but really more so Drew. And I think it's just about having two veterans where that's, Drew has been really good, but I still don't think he brings a true kind of calming veteran presence that Carver does, where Carver is not the best, but he's also kind of just a security blanket. And that's what Max offers a little bit, obviously being 5-6 years in college football now, but he doesn't have that full arsenal to say, I can be a guaranteed bona fide Big Ten left tackle. He was at Maryland, but he was at Maryland for 2 games. And then he went back home to deal with some family things, as we've talked about ad nauseum. And so he doesn't have that same level that Carver had, where he's a 2-year starter at right tackle. He's a 2-year starter at the Power 5 level. That's just kind of the gap where you're talking about. He's a good 6th man. He's a great 6th man. But not all 6 men in the NBA are good starters. Like, you'd rather have him come off the bench in that sense and be a good kind of plug-and-play guy versus depending on him week in and week out.
So I hear what you're saying there, and I like where you're going with it. I just don't think he's the 6th man on this offensive line. I think it's Paki Finau. And this is one of those situations where, depending on what the offensive line looks like, because we saw John Mills, I think he took all the snaps at left guard in this game against Ohio State. This is one of those weeks where I still don't know what this room is going to look like long term. It very clearly does feel like John Mills is the long-term solution at left tackle, or at least that's what Jedd Fisch and Michael Switzer and Jimmy Doherty seem to believe at this point in time, with Paki probably taking over at left guard by the start of 2026. I just kind of want to see him a little bit more moving forward. And it's something where if you need to rotate him in with both John and Gear and Hatchet to get him on the field, or maybe he does start taking some tackle reps because he's got the size and the frame to be able to play the position as well. I just think that that's the kind of guy you want to see get on the field a little bit more. I mean, I don't know if he's ready to play tackle against, a Michigan or an Illinois per se, but if you're able to throw him out there and just get him some snaps in a game like this, like Rutgers, Purdue, some of the teams that aren't necessarily at the top of the Big Ten, I think that's just another answer because, when you look at just the way that the snaps were divvied up over the first 3 weeks of the regular season, it's very clear that this coaching staff is just as high on Paki as they are on John Mills. I just think that the physicality and the strength that John Mills brings as a run blocker right now is what really set him over the top. But with an injury like this, it's where having somebody like Paki can be so crucial. Is he's athletic enough to play multiple spots on the line, and you just need to figure out what the best fit is for him.
I don't disagree with that. I just, listening to what Jedd had to say on Monday, he did mention, John Mills played left tackle in high school, so he has more experience in that. He did mention Paki in the kind of left tackle rotation, comparison, depth, whatever you want to call it, if Carver can't go. But it did seem like there was an emphasis on John Mills, to your point of saying, hey, if Max isn't getting the job done, we do got John Mills. And I think that's kind of where I'm at, where I'm long-term intrigued to see where they go. But I wouldn't be surprised if you did kick John Mills out to tackle. Let's say if Max does struggle with Maryland, maybe you're at halftime and it's just the offense has call it 110 yards, maybe max, maybe less. Then I could see a switch where you put John Mills at left tackle, bring in Paki at left guard, and that would solidify things a lot more. And that's the whole point of having the depth. Obviously they don't have as much experience, but the talent in this offensive line room compared to last season is night and day different.
Absolutely.
I think you look at last season, this was, you had 2 guys that you could replace, but by no means were you confident like you are in John Mills and Paki Finau. And so I think no matter what ends up coming to fruition against Maryland, I think Washington's in a good spot overall, no matter what.
Let's talk about the other side of the trenches, because I think that there are still some questions about outside linebacker depth. Right after a message from our good friends over at Quo. One of the tools that help make a huge difference for business owners is Quo, formerly OpenPhone. It's the same great business phone system you've heard me talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or computer, so no more carrying 2 phones or relying on a landline. Their built-in AI agent is a game changer. It can answer after-hours calls, capture leads, and keep business moving even when you're off the clock. Whether you're a solo operator juggling everything or part of a larger team, Quo makes it easy to stay responsive and professional. See why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly OpenPhone. Get started free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockdowncollege. That's QUO.com/lockdowncollege. And if you've got existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. So I'm going to get my pure speculation thing out of the way right off the bat here. Of the two injuries that we're going to be talking about on this show, with Carver Willis and now Zach Durfee, Zach's was the one that seemed a little bit more severe because we saw him leave the game in a sling and everything. So if one of these two guys is going to be out a lot longer, it's unfortunately probably Zach Durfee. You know, he's had some really bad injury luck over the years. I'm a little concerned what this depth looks like without him, because we look at somebody like Isaiah Ward. I think he's a really effective pass rusher. We've seen him be so over his year plus now at Washington. I think that this coaching staff still has questions about what he looks like as a run defender, because we saw him get taken off the field a lot for, in favor of Jacob Lane or Deshawn Lynch in some of those reps against Ohio State and throughout the season. So I'm curious about that. I look at a guy like Jacob Lane. Jedd Fisch gave him a shout out during his Monday press conference saying he's had an excellent season so far. I think that we're going to see a much bigger role for him, and especially after the Russell Davis injury as well. Now we look at a guy like Deshawn Lynch, who we like as an edge-setting run defender, but it feels like that's just kind of all he's been asked to do so far this year. Beyond that, there are a lot of questions. Hayden Moore is still in his first year playing the position after moving over from inside linebacker. And then freshman Devin Hyde seems to just kind of round out this rotation. And I think that there's some, high-end potential there, maybe long-term with a couple of these guys, especially, Devin being in front of the pod and everything. We got a chance to really dive into his background and where he was at as a run defender going into his senior year of high school and what he wanted to work on from a pass rush standpoint. But I think that this coaching staff is really going to have to piece some stuff together on the edge right now.
With that being said, I think I'd throw X Alexander in the mix as well, because when you're talking about limited numbers, X is the guy that, the ironic part is, as kind of worth mentioning, in that Zaydrius Rainey-Sale sounds like he's getting close to being back. Now, I know, have talked about him a lot as maybe a potential outside linebacker in the future. Maybe that's another guy you throw as an honorable mention down the line. I don't think it's maybe in 2-3 weeks, if he's able to come back, that could be a significant, addition as well. But yeah, there's not really as much kind of beyond Jacob Lane. There's nobody that you can look at that edge room and say, I'm going to bet on him making an impact in some way, shape, or form. And the key is against the run as well, where Isaiah Ward, great speed pass rusher. Russell Davis, when he was healthy, great speed pass rusher. The problem is in the Big Ten, you can't just have that speed guy, and certainly not on both sides. That's why Jacob Lane has kind of been that MVP for the, call it edge room / defensive line, because he's able to do both. He's able to drop back in coverage, fit the run, and bring pressure. I think that's something that, much like Zach Durfee, when healthy, he shows he can do as well. And I think Zach obviously is going to be the bigger loss if he's not able to go, because when you think about the injuries, the elbow for Zach, Carver, was able to walk off. It looked like maybe he just got rolled up, a little sore. But Zach, if you don't have that twist, maybe if you don't have that flexibility in your arms to be able to move and, have one or two moves, to use against an offensive lineman, that you basically might as well not play. Because what are you going to do besides use your head as a battering ram?
So I certainly see where you're going with that. I want to go back to a point you were just making about having, speed versus power and everything, where it's one of the interesting things that I think we noticed, especially after the injury against Ohio State, where whenever Isaiah Ward was on the field, there was just, okay, it looks like, they're going to want to run the ball that way. They're going to want to run it left or run it right, whatever side he was lined up on. And I think that's something that teams are certainly going to continue to just notice and try to take advantage of moving forward. And it's where having a guy like Devin or a guy like Hayden Moore or X Alexander, who are a little bit heavier right now, can just set the edge a little bit firmer and try to turn these plays back inside, which was something that Zach had done such a good job of over the first 3.5 games before he got injured. And I think sometimes that kind of goes unnoticed and goes a little bit under the radar, because this has been the position that Washington just seems to have had the most trouble recruiting over, the first 20 or so months, however long it's been since Jedd Fisch and his coaching staff got here. And we've talked a lot about why, where it is a very hard position right now to recruit across college football, where, some teams are going to just throw exorbitant money at the position and just say, okay, we hope this high-end prospect works out. We're just going to throw him on the field and whatever happens from there happens. And then, of course, there's the other side of that of teams are also paying just as much in the transfer portal for some of these guys to come in. And Washington has struggled to, I don't want to say get up to that mold. I just think that they had other positional holes that they wanted to address before getting that, like building out the interior so you don't just get run over in conference games. And that showed. That showed in this game against Ohio State, where they looked pretty solid in the middle. The pass rush wasn't there, but you were able to make some kind of impact against the run. And now you need to, it was something I was talking about with our good buddy Alex Katzen following Jedd Fisch's press conferences. You need to go out and make sure you secure a high-end edge rusher in the transfer portal this offseason to just kind of steady that room and give it a veteran presence. But at the same time, that doesn't help you right now. And when you look at where this room is right now, I think that there is one true 3-down edge rusher, just outside linebacker in this room. And it is, as you said, it's Jacob Lane, where you can find ways if you're an opposing team to counter, oh, Deshawn Lynch is on the field. Okay, let's check out of this run into this play action pass. Or, oh, Isaiah Ward is on the field. Let's check out of this pass and we can, run it that way instead. Or those are things I'm really curious to see if there's just going to be a little more of that in these weeks going forward. Because that's one thing to note about Maryland is coming to this game, they're coming off a bye. Rutgers next week is also coming off a bye. So these are things that teams, especially with 2 weeks to prepare, can pick up on film. And I think when I look at, Hayden Moore, X3 Alexander, Devin Hyde, whoever else you want to add to that mix, I think they might give you a little bit more in terms of setting the edge against the run. I'm curious to see how this is going to turn out, because especially for Durfee, who was coming off a game where he had 11 pressures against Washington State, it's really unfortunate to see this injury happen, because all of a sudden it was, okay, he's starting to put it together after missing so much time, obviously with an injury in 2024 as well. And maybe Washington has that true just game-wrecking edge finally that they've been looking for, and pairing him with somebody like Jacob Lane, who's such a nice complementary piece. You could have done a lot of really nice things with that, but it's unfortunate that's not the case right now. And it will bring up a lot of questions about this pass rush moving forward, and rightfully so.
No, there's nothing to disagree with there. I think you make a lot of good points. I do, as you were saying all that, it did make me kind of remember, and we talked about it a little bit, Deshawn Lynch did, have an injury in fall camp. So him getting up to full speed, having the bye week, and, then playing Wazoo, now the Ohio State game, he was in a little more packages. So I wonder, is the Maryland game not his coming out party, but maybe where he's at full strength, he's at full comfort now, to where you might not have felt him in the last couple of games, but you're able to feel him now this weekend. And especially in places Zach Durfee, you're going to have some guys step up. But the problem is, when you look at who it's going to be, we haven't seen it on a consistent basis. And I think that's kind of, and that's where the problem lies, where Hayden Moore looked great in that last fall scrimmage, the mock game, whatever you want to call it, but not really in the season. And I think, we saw what he could become, but we haven't seen it in a game that actually matters. And so maybe this is his coming out party in a sense, where he's able to have maybe 4 or 5 pressures and tackle for loss or 2. Those are the kind of things where you want to see, hey, he emerged in fall camp, but he hasn't really done it. Every week you could have somebody else emerge, and that's the whole point of having depth. But if they don't emerge, it's all for nothing.
So, and that's kind of the thing where maybe we see Devin Hyde get some more snaps in this game. And I think that's the one guy who I want to focus on right here before we move on, because with a guy like Devin, the athleticism is there from his background playing rugby and everything. That he's got the high football IQ. All the everydayers who listen to our interview with him know what kind of player and person he is, both on and off the field, and someone who will work hard and try to make an impact and do all these things. But he's still a true freshman in the Big Ten. And in a game like this, it'd be great to see him get a couple more snaps. Obviously, he got a sack against Colorado State, and I think this coaching staff has very high expectations for him, or else he, would be redshirting right now. So I wonder what his impact might look like, because you mentioned Hayden Moore, and I just think it's fair to throw Devin's name into this boat as well, because now all of a sudden, instead of looking for, one more guy to step up, where that's kind of what it felt like with Zach Durfee, where it's, okay, that Zach and, Jacob Lane and Isaiah Ward are going to be guys who can get after the passer, and Deshawn Lynch is someone who's big and physical and a good athlete and can set the edge for you really well. And maybe you're looking for one more guy to make an impact, so it's not just, a 2 deep. Now all of a sudden it's, okay, Jacob Lane is the guy that you're really looking for to, kind of stay on the field the whole time. Isaiah Ward and Deshawn Lynch can rotate. And even that just kind of feels like it's still just one player in a sense, because you have one guy for one job and one guy for another. So you're still looking for more in that department. And if, maybe a combination of Hayden Moore and Devin Hyde can step up and give you a little bit more on the edge, that'd be nice. And that'd be what you're looking for, but it's just not the high end just room that you're looking for and you're hoping for, especially if you're Ryan Walters, because you want some of these big time experienced athletes like a Zach Durfee to be able to take advantage of these one-on-one matchups on the edge, because I look at the Michigan game as kind of an outlier in this sense. Over the next 4 to 5 weeks, there aren't a lot of offensive linemen who I think could have been, I think that Zach Durfee could have taken advantage of, is probably the best way to say it, where he could have really shown, hey, I can be a mid-level NFL draft prospect by, recording 3-4 sacks over the next, let's just say 5 or 6 games. And all of a sudden you have a very different feeling about this pass rush, because you're not playing the elite of the elite in the Big Ten anymore. You're playing a bunch of teams that are still looking for their footing in this second and third tier of the conference. It's just unfortunate that it's not going to work out that way. Durfee is going to be out for, let's just say, an extended period of time right now. But Lars, speaking of guys who are out a while, Jacob Manu is coming off an ACL, and Jedd Fisch is trying to get him another year. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives you so many different ways to play. You can build parlays, try player props, or even follow the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. So Jedd Fisch made a bunch of really interesting comments about redshirts during his press conference today. I want to talk about Zaydrius Rainey-Sale a little bit later on, because he didn't mention him in the same light, but he certainly falls into this discussion, because with a guy like Jacob Manu, who is less than a year removed from an ACL tear, it always kind of felt like the plan was going to be, maybe you save him for an Ohio State, Michigan, Illinois, maybe Oregon. Then all of a sudden, hey, great, you have an extra year. Jedd Fisch said that he and his coaching staff have been in talks with the NCAA about 5-for-5 sort of things, if different injunctions and court cases and rulings like that will give some of these guys an extra year of eligibility, because it's coming up on decision time for an Omari Evans, who's played in 2 games now, for Jacob Manu, who would have 3 more before hitting that redshirt number. And Zaydrius Rainey-Sale in the same boat as well, as he recovers from an ACL tear and is supposed to practice in full this week. And listening to Jedd Fisch talk about it today at his press conference, I was very intrigued by this, because it felt for both of those guys, both of the seniors in Manu and Evans, like a pick your spot kind of thing. Like we talked about a little bit in the preseason, speculated this might be the case. And I want to start with Manu here, because Jedd Fisch said that this is a guy who, with another year of eligibility, can come back and be a team captain, can earn a whole bunch in NIL because of who he is as a player and his personality and all these other different things. But then on top of that, for a guy who just lost pretty much an entire year because of the ACL injury, it'd be nice to give him a full opportunity to prove himself to the NFL draft as well, which, as we know, is a key component of Jedd Fisch's program.
Yeah, and ironically, a key component of Jedd Fisch. Do you know what he would have been if he wasn't a football coach?
Lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's kind of fitting that he's in this situation, because I think he did mention a little bit that with Buddha going out and Jacob coming back in, it was almost like they were tagging in for each other. But I don't think the way that he made it sound was, I don't think they want that to be the case, where they would love to have ideally both those guys back maybe next season. Certainly one of the two has, with that, veteran presence being provided in the room. But with Jacob, it did seem like certainly against Ohio State, that he is worthy of, if you can find a way to, maybe stretch that 5 games into 6 and 7 with the postseason and things like that, that would be the optimal route. But I just think, it's going to be hard to keep him off the field depending on how long Buddha is going to be out. Where, Devin Bryant's been good, Exley's been good, but Jacob provides that different level. Like if he's going to be a captain next season, that's great. But you can also use that this season with the talent you have on offense and the talent you have surrounding you on defense with Takari and Ephesians outside. You don't want to waste that talent for the 1 year that you have it.
Yeah, but that's and you're right. And that's kind of the thing here, where it feels like a lot of this will wind up being somewhat out of the control of this coaching staff, where you can say, okay, yeah, they are going to play him in 4 games or whatever, or, and try to just get a red shirt the more natural way, I feel like is the best way to say that. Or you're just going to let him go full bore because he's listed as a starter this week on the depth chart alongside X-Ray Alexander. So there are several different schools of thought with how that could proceed. So I just, as I think about it, it's weird because you can look back on just some of the conversations we had, which is kind of what I'm doing right now. And as we were saying in the preseason, like it was very clear that the plan for Jacob Manu was try to redshirt him at some point, and then of course, obviously the unfortunate injury to Buda Alukta throws it all into just throws it all into chaos. I think that we're probably just going to see Jacob Manu play for the rest of the season because that is the best possible option. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to tie this in with Zaydrius Rainey-Sale. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to say Zaydrius because we've gotten a bunch of questions about him and where he might be in terms of coming back from an injury where Jedd said he's going to practice in full this week, which is a really great sign. I think it might take a couple of weeks for that before this coaching staff is ready to let him go into a game. Like, let's say we see him back for the Purdue game. I feel like you're happy with that because then all of a sudden you don't need to worry about picking and choosing spots to redshirt a guy. And all of a sudden, you still kind of know what your linebacker room is like going into the 2026 season where maybe Jacob Manu can't be a part of it, unfortunately. But you have Zaydrius, you have Buda Alukta back healthy, Devin Bryant, X3 Alexander still has another year of eligibility, and then Donovan Robinson's further along, Jonathan Epperson is further along. So there are so many different ways that it always felt like one of these guys, especially when I think about the 3 transfers that Washington took at linebacker, one of them was always probably only going to be here a year just because of how the room is shaping up for this year and then long-term with taking 3 linebackers in the 2025 class. And I feel like it might end up being Jacob, and I don't think that's what the staff wants, but that just seems like the most logical outcome right now.
Yeah, you're 100% right. That wasn't the plan coming in, but again, the injury to Buda changed everything. I think if Buda was healthy the entire season, Buda goes to the NFL, Jacob takes his spot next year, team captain. That was the perfect scenario for Washington and Jedd Fisch and Ryan Walters. And now you go to probably plan C, I want to say. It's not a plan B, it's like a plan C where Jacob is absolutely like a solid starter and the guy you want to play. But I think Jedd was trying to think long-term with that transfer where now you have to basically say, okay, because to your point, playing him in every game or every third game to get the number down to 4, you have no consistency at that point. If Jacob plays against Ohio State and doesn't play again until the Michigan game, and then doesn't play again until they play UCLA in November, I think. So you spread it out long enough, and then you throw in the Oregon game. Great, that's awesome, but he's not going to be like that. That's a wasted year. You might not play at all, and just call it what it is. Which is why I think it's going to come to fruition that he will end up being a kind of contributor throughout the rest of the season, which is kind of the antithesis of where Omari Evans is at. I think kind of to go on the other side of the situation, you have Rashid who's out, who's probably coming back within the next 3 to 4 weeks. Let's just tentatively say that, potentially. Tentatively, that team, that would be where the timeline would go. Omari looked good against Ohio State. You know how many times I've watched that juke move back that he had, the stutter step, the push.
That was a great move, yeah.
And I was so high on Omari, but then we just haven't seen it come to fruition for maybe 1, 2, or 3 different reasons. So some of which maybe Omari, some of which maybe not. And I think, to me, that's the guy you went to go get another receiver for a reason. And you got a veteran with 1 year, supposedly in theory left. But if you redshirt him now, you're basically doing that with the intent of Denzel's leaving, and then Omari takes that veteran, senior leadership role next season. But it's almost like, why would you go down that road?
Here's why. Because you come into next season then where Raiden Vrinesbright looks awesome. Desmond Roebuck looks like a tremendous player. The only other veteran you have in terms of guys with a significant amount of on-field experience is Rashid Williams. Outside, and even that is unfortunately not that much right now. So why would you not try to find a way to keep Omari around if possible, which certainly sounded like it might be in the plans. And I'm curious because you're just putting yourself in the same position next season that we've been talking about right now for a couple of weeks, where it probably looks a little bit different because Raiden is more experienced and can step into a bigger role. Desmond is as well. Chris Lawson could probably take on more of a role. Justice Williams. But it's still the same discussion of, well, this guy doesn't have that much experience. That guy doesn't have this much experience. And, they're all really talented. And maybe Mason James steps into a role. Marcus Harris steps up. Obviously, Ajak Harris, Kevin Green as well. There's so many names you can throw out there, but none of them are overly experienced and just fill the role that Omari does right now. So I'm curious to see how this is going to play out, because it also just, I don't know if this is going to be the case either, because I don't think you can do this right now with just the way this position is shaping up. But if you do want to find a way to redshirt Omari, like that's probably in your best interest, because if you don't, all of a sudden you're probably going to be looking for another veteran wide receiver in the same mold where, hey, maybe he's a little bit unproven. Maybe he was in an offense that didn't utilize his skill set to the best of his ability, but we want to bring him in and see if he can help compete with some of these young guys that we're really hoping to bring along and be a mentor to some of these younger guys as well. I think that there are too many questions right now in this wide receiver room. And I don't necessarily think that that's all a bad thing, because there's a lot of talent at that position, but all the questions come from a general umbrella of inexperience, I want to call it, because you're still looking for so much of that position. And it's why I'm somewhat comfortable about where Washington is in the schedule right now, because let's say Omari just play out the rest of the year. That's just a really nice piece to have. And at the same point, let's say he does get his touches in and he turns into the wide receiver 2 that you were really looking for in this offense. That's great, because you can still get Raiden Vinespread his snaps. You can still get Desmond Roebuck his snaps, and you can still find different ways to let this receiver room play out, and everyone will still develop, at the same rate. And you're not necessarily forcing anybody into a role they're not quite ready for yet. And that's what the most important thing with Omari is right now, is taking stress off of some of these young guys.
And literally for every single reason, you just made the case for me. It's like, that's why he should play. That's why you don't redshirt him, because you're just kicking the can down a year. And by the way, if the cream is going to rise to the top from the young players in that room next year, Omari back does what? Like, yeah, veteran presence is great. You have Kevin Green for that. If you want a veteran in the room, call him that. Like, that's what it would be, where if Omari's the veteran this season opposite of Denzel, how are you seeing that come to fruition if he doesn't contribute on the field and doesn't at least, again, what he had 2 for 28 against Ohio State? Not
that doesn't mean he won't get more looks as he, continues to get ingrained in the offense after coming off an injury that it just sounds like just kept him on the sideline the whole time.
Exactly. But the fact that you can see him contribute, the fact that, Raiden gets 1 catch a game, 2 catches a game, that's something that you can at least point to tangibly and say, you're getting a return on investment there. If he redshirts, to me, it's, again, you might as well just make him an assistant coach for a grad assistant at that point.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everybody who's tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the season, so please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, we're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day, so make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, jump right down below in the comments section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.